Hi, Courtney Robinson here today to talk to you about the science of stress management. So, this is just some of the science behind stress management. And for those of you who don't know, my position, my job is stress management specialist in intensive cardiac rehab. But I'm also a yoga therapist and have been working in the field of stress management far longer than I have worked in cardiac rehab. So, about 22 years now, and I'm actually about to go on a 1 year sabbatical with no real intention of returning to teaching at this time. Not saying it won't happen, I'm just not sure. So I want to kind of go over some of the science behind stress management, and all of this is available online by looking it up. This is not a talk at a university. I'm not a professor, so I'm not going to give all the links and everything to this. But anything that I tell you today is easily found by Googling the research. The company I work for is a large company, but I don't in any way want to infringe on any copywritten information. So therefore, I'm going to share from my own experience. So the first thing is that we know that stress causes inflammation in the body, and that many ailments that people go and see their doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists for, and other things like accidents and suicides have a component related to stress. Whether it was stress that was making them eat the wrong foods, that was causing them to feel addiction, suicidal ideology, anxiety, depression, those all tend to have a relationship beyond just the fact that they create a stress response in our body, which then in turn affects our body, but they create illness in the body, or they contribute to illness along with other factors. And so that's one thing we know about holistic health is it's never just one thing. Everything is kind of like a hologram. It's all working together all the time. The second thing is that there was a study done by, I believe she was Austrian, but a famous science researcher named Elizabeth Blackburn. And she is the one that did all of the research on telomeres. And that is basically the mapping of our body that shows the ends of our telomeres, or the ends of our chromosomes, that show and help predict our life expectancy. She won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for this. And what they found was that they took groups of women, and these groups of women, I believe they were in their 30s and 40s. They had either they were caregivers of children with autism or parents with Alzheimer's or dementia. And they found that these groups of women, the ones that they gave a stress management practice like yoga and meditation, had shorter telomeres than those that did not have a stress management practice. It showed that longer telomeres. It showed that the shortening of the lifespan was 9 to 17 years for those that did not have a stress management practice. So what does that tell us? That tells us that your situation can be the same as someone else's. However, how you handle it, how you're handling your stress, and what we often call self-care, right? How you're handling your stress is going to predict your health outcome as that caregiver. So this was groundbreaking science that was done, and that has paved the way for a lot of what you're seeing today in the field of stress management. The next thing that we know is that when you look at the nervous system, you have the sympathetic nervous system and you have the parasympathetic nervous system. And so what happens is the sympathetic nervous system is basically what goes into effect when we have fight or flight. And it's a good thing. We do need it. It helps us when we're under great amount of stress to handle the stress, because it raises the stress hormones in the body like norepinephrine and let me see if this adrenaline. And sometimes we need that when we're in a stressful situation, when we have to run away. It makes us run faster. It makes us breathe faster. It raises our heart rate. But it also constricts our blood vessels, which is needed in the event that we're hurt so that we don't bleed out and things like that. It makes our eyes dilate so we can see better. However, lately, in this world that we have, not just lately, but this world that we live in now, there are so many chronic stressors. Like the digital world is so stressful for us now. We are invaded with stressors. We can turn on our TV, we can turn on the radio, we can look at our phone, we can look at our computer, and stress is coming at us from all angles all the time. There is no place that we can be free of stress. If we're in a restaurant, there's TVs usually going on everywhere. It's just very hard to get away from it. So in response to that, and in yoga philosophy, we know that in order to find balance in the mind and the body, we have to add some of the opposite. So what's the opposite? Well, physiologically, it's the PNS, or the parasympathetic nervous system. And so what happens with the parasympathetic nervous system is that's a part of our nervous system that we call rest and digest. It's the opposite of fight or flight. And that begins to bring calm to the body. It begins to tone the nervous system. And so what I tell our patients is, you go to the gym to build your muscles, right? So that when you have to lift something heavy, you're strong. Well, we do stress management practices to tone and strengthen our nervous system, specifically our PNS, so that when we are dealt a stressful situation, we are more resilient to that stress. So how do we do that with the PNS? Well, and what does the PNS control? It helps to regulate our breathing rhythm. It helps to regulate our blood pressure. It helps to bring a healing response to the body. So we do that in 5 ways. These are the 5 proven ways to tone the nervous system. And they are through stretching, which helps to strengthen the bones. It helps with coordination and balance. It helps to bring about awareness of our body as well. It also, stretching helps to regulate our breathing pattern, believe it or not. Then progressive relaxation, which it helps us to recover from exertion, from tension in the body. And when we have muscle tension, we often have mental tension. And when we undo muscle tension, the mental tension also begins to lessen. The next thing is that also helps breathing, slow, gentle breathing, 2-part breathing, 3-part breathing, alternate nostril breathing. That begins to regulate our breathing rhythm and bring everything back into balance so that we're not having that adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine response, that we're having we're more able to regulate the hormones that help to balance and calm the body. So progressive relaxation just calms the mind and the body. And then we have imagery as the 3rd type. Imagery or visualization is kind of the opposite of worrying. We're using imagery when we worry, when we catastrophize, when we start to think about, well, if this happens and this happens and this happens, we are catastrophizing. And that raises our fight or flight. And that can be chronic for some people. I myself was just born a person prone to anxiety. Some people are. It's probably why I got into this field. I had been practicing yoga for many years before I became a teacher. And I knew that when I practiced, I felt so much better. I didn't really understand the science behind it at the time, but now that I do, it's been life-changing. And it's something that even if I'm not teaching it, I know that I will always use it in my life going forward. I've done so many YouTube videos. I've written books on this. There's 3 books out there, 2 that I wrote myself and 1 that I'm a contributor to for a textbook. And so I know that my work is out there, and other very smart, intelligent people, smarter than me, have work out there on this. So let's talk about imagery a little bit more. I kind of got off on a tangent there. Imagery supports healing, but more importantly, what imagery does, let me get a drink of water. Imagery begins to change not only our conscious thoughts and behaviors, but our unconscious thoughts and behaviors. It lays down new patterns in the mind and the body. We begin to behave in a way that follows the imagery. So let's say that I have to go meet one of my children, and we're going to have a talk about something that's really stressful. So I might imagine having that talk, let's say I have 3 boys and a girl, and 2 girls by marriage. But let's say I'm talking to one of my boys, and his response, I'm worried it's going to be negative. That might reframe how I approach it. I might talk to him about it. And I might think about how I'm going to respond if there is a negative response. Because I have imagined the scene beforehand, it is more, and if I see it going well, it is more likely to go well. Not only because I think it will go well or I imagine it going well, but because I'm preparing myself for that future scenario. Imagery, even that is not based in, like, say, a realistic situation that's going to happen in the future. We could think about things that have happened. We could imagine, for instance, a lot of times I imagine that I'm with my grandmother, who's long since deceased, and I imagine being with her and talking to her and getting her wisdom. This brings about a sense of calm where I might feel anxious because I don't have my grandmother with me anymore to talk to and give me guidance. When I close my eyes and I go there, I remember my grandmother. I remember the things that she taught me. I know what she would say to me. So it brings about a sense of calm, reassurance to the body and to the mind. And it begins to change the way that I behave and think moving forward. The breathing. So breathing exercises, they begin to increase the oxygen saturation in our blood. And in the next video, I'll be showing all of these techniques. So the breathing saturates the blood with oxygen. It begins to regulate the breathing rhythm, which also, when we breathe, if you could see inside the neck, there's a great video out that you can see the vagus nerve when you're doing deep breathing, and you can see it being massaged in the throat area. So it helps to ground us. It brings about that mind-body connection. It helps to regulate our heart rate and our blood pressure, and it begins to tone the parasympathetic nervous system. Meditation. Meditation, I often tell people, if you're uncomfortable with the word meditation, and some people are, especially where I live in the South, think about meditation just meaning focused concentration, okay? So it brings about a sense of calm, of clarity, a sharpness, of insight or inspiration. You don't do meditation right or wrong, okay? You begin to notice what you're thinking. You notice what you're feeling when you're in meditation. So let's say I have you meditating. There's many types of meditation, but let's say we're doing gazing meditation. So we have, let's say I go outside and I pick a rose out of my garden and I put it in a little vase. I have you looking at that rose, and then I have you close your eyes and visualize the rose, and you hold the vision of the rose in your mind until it goes away. You open, you gaze at the rose again, you hold the vision. That's one kind of focused meditation. Another kind would be to be thinking about the breath. I'm thinking about breathing in and breathing out. Now, I'm just focusing on the breath, but let's say my mind goes away to, oh my gosh, I forgot that I need to pick up bananas at the grocery store today, and oh, I just need to call my mom. Okay, we're going to acknowledge that. I need to call my mom, need to pick up bananas. I'm going to label that a doing. Those are doing actions, and I'm just going to think about them like we hear this all the time. Little clouds in the sky just floating on by. Oh yeah, I'm focusing on my breathing. Okay, so how does that help, right? Like, what? Well, okay, yeah, I get that, but how does that help? Well, let's say that you start to catastrophize and you're focused on something, and you are more likely when you meditate and you focus on catching yourself wandering or catastrophizing or doing, you are more likely to be able to go, oh my gosh, I'm catastrophizing. I'm just going to focus on this. I'm just going to focus on my work. I'm just going to focus on my breathing. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to come back to it later. So meditation helps bring about sharpness, insight, introspection, clarity, calmness. And the beautiful thing about it is the more you do it, the more you carry that with you on a regular basis. So it's super cool. And I'll give you some of the stats on that too. So there was a Harvard study done, and I looked it up. It was done in 2011, that showed that the gray matter in the brain, if you did a brain scan of someone's brain before they started meditating, and then 8 weeks later, with an average of 27 minutes a day, I don't know where they got the 27 minutes, but that was the average on a daily basis for 8 weeks. They found that the gray matter in the frontal part of the cortex and prefrontal cortex was thicker. Now, that is the part that helps with emotional regulation. And it also helps with self-awareness, compassion, and introspection. All right. So again, it's not the circumstances around us, it's how we handle the circumstances around us, how we're handling things. And when we handle things differently, our life begins to seem to work a little bit better, or we manage it better. If we're losing our temper, our relationships are going to suffer, and things just seem to spiral out of control. There was also 5 total areas that got strengthened that they found, and I believe, don't quote me on this, but my prior research on this was frontal, prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, which is at the top, the memory center, the medulla oblongata, and the base of the brain, the amygdala. So those were the areas. The medulla oblongata is associated with the ability to be an observer. The hippocampus is memory, and if it serves me right, the base of the brain, the amygdala, is like basic function of life. Okay, I think it's called our reptilian brain. All right, so there are more studies that have shown, and I failed to write down where this one came up, that laughter also is really good medicine for us. That laughter creates blood flow in the body. It increases blood flow throughout the whole body by 20%. It relaxes and expands the vessel walls. And so what I tell our patients is, or what I tell any participant that I've had in my care for the past 22 years, is if you're down and depressed, don't go watching the sad movies. Don't go watching the scary movies. Watch the funny movie. It's going to help overall increase your blood flow. It's going to help increase your happy hormones like dopamine, serotonin. I don't know the direct relation to that or the research, but we know that laughter helps bring us up. It lifts us with joy. It helps us feel more lighthearted. And I tell people all the time, these health benefits are great, but the ability to have more joy in your life, I mean, as simple as that is, this is your life. This is your journey. You're on the journey today. It's not about when you get there or what happened in the past. Today is our life, and we want to find joy in every day as much as we can in a healthy way, obviously. So we also know that the 6th leading cause of stress in the United States is based on digital issues that we have and that we need to digitally detox on a regular basis. So what does that mean? So what that means is we need to take a break from screens as much as possible. You know, taking some time, taking a walk in nature and putting your phone away, turning your phone off or to silent, turning it down. I tell my children all the time, I don't keep my notifications on with my texts. I don't want my phone beeping at me all the time. If you really need me, call me. If I don't answer because my phone is on silent, I'm working or I'm at an appointment or something like that, I will call you back. If I don't answer the first time, call me repeatedly so I will know when it's an emergency. So we need to take a break. A lot of times what I do with this is I allow myself my phone certain times of the day to watch YouTube or whatever. I do what's called habit stacking. So there are certain videos I like to catch up on. I allow myself to do that right in the morning when I'm drinking, after I've kind of woke up and drinking my coffee, and then when I'm on the treadmill every day. I will listen to podcasts and things like that while I'm cleaning, but I don't just like randomly watch things. I do not watch the news. Occasionally I turn on the news on the radio or will look at the news online just to see if I'm up to date on world affairs. But I tend to try to avoid the sensationalized news media. We really have to be careful of that, especially at night as we're going to bed, having the news on, because your subconscious brain is the most active in the 30 minutes before you fall asleep. And what you put into your brain in that last 30 minutes before you go to sleep is going to affect you on a subconscious level. So at the very least, and I need to get better at this, I do look at my phone at night a lot of the time if I don't have a book to read. And that is something that I need to stop doing, but often I'm just looking at Pinterest at pictures and something like really light. However, it is best to have Nothing screen related on, or read a book right before you go to bed. All right, the next one is that we know that sharing our feelings is also helps to reduce stress. So when I had my school, a lot of people, I know that some people don't like this for some reason. It's kind of become, I don't know, a contentious issue. But we would do what we would call opening circle. And you could pass, and there was no judgment about passing. We understood that some people don't like it, and I'm very introverted. So we would do a meditation beforehand, and I would ask people to focus maybe on one thing they felt grateful for that day. And this is also part of our cardiac rehab, is we have group, and they pick a word a day to focus on. And so instead of just like sharing all your feelings, if you're not comfortable with that, I would ask people, I would say, I'm going to give you 2 to 3 minutes. You can tell us what your gratitude was for the day, or you can share whatever's on your mind. Just keep it to 2 to 3 minutes. And there was no crosstalk, so no giving advice, just listening. So we know that sharing our feelings with other people and having support is a great predictor of overall mental and physical health. So you need to have support, whether it's a therapist, a pastor, a friend, a spouse. It is very important to have someone to share your feelings with. The next one is that pets reduce our overall blood pressure, cholesterol, weight. This was done at the Winthrop University in New York, and it helps with our blood pressure and heart rate. And I've got one, looky here, one right there, one in the hallway. Woo, sorry about that. So the next one is gratitude. We know that gratitude, when we are grateful, when we picture what we're grateful for, and we think about what we're grateful for, visualizing and say it. If I say, I am grateful for my dog Pearl, because she is sweet and I'm able to give her big hugs, and she's soft and fluffy, and she smiles at me and she pats me with her big old heavy paws, that releases oxytocin in my brain that has a direct connection to my heart that creates healing in my heart. But again, I tell people, while being grateful induces an immune response that's positive, that helps our immune system and helps our heart, it also gives us joy. It reduces depression and anxiety. So any great teacher you're ever going to hear talk is probably going to speak on gratitude at some point. Expressing gratitude verbally, writing it down, journaling, it's life-changing. This is not new news. I think it's come around to be really popular right now, but I've seen it in my 52 years off and on. It'll surge in popularity, and then people go on to the next thing and it'll surge again because it works. It works. And the last one is that the more you are ill or need help, if you are really ill, the more gentle stress management type practices you can do every day. And this is just from my own training as a yoga therapist, not from my work in the hospital or doctor setting, though it is, but it's not just from that. Is that a stress management practice is different than a normal yoga practice. It's not to say that exercise and more active levels of physical yoga are not helpful for stress, because of course they are. However, a stress management practice doesn't raise the heart rate really high or increase the breathing rhythm to be fast, okay? It's a slower heart rate, a slower, steady, easy breathing rhythm. You're not going to get out of breath. You're not going to raise your heart rate. It shouldn't feel challenging. It's going to be very soothing and calming the whole time. So that's what I need people to understand, that is the difference in a stress management type of yoga practice. And by the way, when we talk about yoga, I'm not just talking about postures. I'm talking about all these other areas too. So an 8-limb practice, if you are a teacher in private setting, we don't talk about an 8-limb practice when we are in the medical field, but we are using it. But we're talking about breathing, postures, and then the relaxation areas of meditation, imagery, focus, things like that. So more from a full perspective of the 8-limb system. Now I did not include in there the yamas and niyamas. So, but that would be something that if I'm working one-on-one with somebody, I would definitely include. Is I would bring up, like, let's look at these yamas and niyamas, and let's see how you feel in these areas. In my book, I go into more details about it. So my book is The Mud and the Lotus, a guide and workbook for students of yoga by Courtney Butler. Yes, my name is Robinson now. I was Butler prior to getting remarried in 2018. So you can find that at all bookstores online. You may even be able to find it in a bookstore, but all the major bookstores have my book. Thank you so much for listening, and I appreciate you. Bye-bye.